I'm just going to give a general overview of, a little bit of things, and then delve into more technical things for some of the tournaments we run and some things maybe people haven't considered that go out and ice fish recently. Some of the technology that you see up here has really come a long ways and changed how a lot of people ice fish, and I'll go through some of that as well. Ice safety in general, they say, the cliche is there's no such thing as safe ice, right? And, if you've been out ice fishing, you know that it's not very enjoyable if you don't feel safe while you're out there, right? And so, DNR gives guidelines, if it's 2 inches or less, you probably shouldn't be on it. And from being on 2 inches of ice, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't fish 2 inches of ice. I wouldn't recommend anybody to. But in general, they say for general ice fishing, if you got 4 inches of ice, you're probably pretty safe if you're on foot, walking around. 4 inches of ice is a lot stronger than a lot of people realize. I have no problem standing next to 3 or 4 guys in a very close group, standing around talking on the ice if it's 4 inches or more. The DNR says 5 inches for a snowmobile or ATV. I'd say 5 to 6 inches if there's a large group. We have a tournament a group that is anywhere from 60 to 80 anglers with their equipment on a very small area of ice. And so we've seen through experience that when you put that many people in that small space, that it can really affect how that ice reacts. It can start sagging, the water comes up through any holes or around any docks. So for us, when we're having an event, we want to see 5 inches of ice in that staging or point of entry for our events. So 5 inches of ice for a snowmobile or ATV. I don't know if you guys seen some of these ATVs they got, but most of them are the size and cost of a small car or a small truck anymore. So I'd say that 5 inches would be for like a standard 1 or 2 passenger ATV, something that's not carrying a bunch of people or a bunch of gear. Then we get into the 8 to 12 for a car to small pickup. That's where you see your big ATVs that are the price of almost the price of a new pickup. That's what I would consider safe ice for those. And then to drive a medium pickup or your standard duty, 1500 F-150, they say 12 to 15 inches of ice. And if you've ever, I'm sure, how many people have driven a vehicle on the ice? Pickup, right? Quite a few of you. Okay, 12 to 15, I think that's a bare minimum as well. I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to pay a truck payment for something sitting on the bottom of the lake. Anybody throw out any factors that might affect the creation of ice? I mean, the weather, obviously, but kind of anything in specific? What do you got?
Varying temperatures.
Varying temperatures, up and down. I guess we've experienced that the last couple of winters, especially. Anybody have anything else that might affect ice that people should be concerned about before they venture out? Snow cover. Snow actually insulates the ice. Even though the light dusting we have in Des Moines has insulated the ice a little bit here in central Iowa. So I do have a list of things, and something I was actually pleasant to see this year while checking the ice. Waterfowl is a big one. If you've spent any time in Dallas County in the last month, you've probably seen some swans. More swans than I ever thought were out there. I mean, they got the 2 clipped swans up at Iowa State, Lancelot, and I can't think of her name, but you think swans are pretty isolated, but I've seen dozens of swans this winter checking ice. But I have here current. So anybody familiar with bridges or Clear Lake or any of that? There's a current that flows underneath the ice that can create thin spots. And so anywhere that the water's flowing in or flowing out, creating that current within the ice, snow cover. This week, wind. I mean, it's been single digits this week. You would think that everything would be iced up and locked up, but I think where we're having our first tournament just capped today. I mean, the wind was making any open water even bigger, even at single digit temperatures. So waterfowl, natural springs can wear out the ice, or wear holes in the ice, aerators. Just a week ago, rain, another inexplicable, or you're thinking single digits, why isn't this lake frozen and safe? The rain last week, I mean, I watched the water temperature of some of the lakes through the ice. I mean, it was almost 40 after that rain. It really brought it up to where you realize you're not making rain no matter what or you're not making ice no matter what the air temperature is. And the last thing I have here is heat absorbent. So, Russian Creek with all its timber, all that timber absorbs heat and affects the ice around that timber. Rock jetties are great for access and getting on the lake and everything, but even that can absorb heat. Weed lines, the weeds can absorb the heat and thin the ice quite a bit. I guess just some things, just in case, it's always a good reminder. Have a plan, make sure somebody knows your plan, update it if it changes. My wife would kill me if I didn't tell her where I was at while I'm ice fishing, because she would just worry about me. Take a friend. Ice fishing is a social event. I mean, that's the great thing about ice fishing. It's not about you and your buddy sitting in a boat, staying far away. A lot of times, the DNR loves it. They walk right up to you, they can talk to you, they can get a fish survey off the lake. It's a great resource for them to kind of figure out what's going on, how thick's the ice, how you guys are doing, what do you catch them on. But it's definitely a social event, something that drew us in quite a bit to it when we started years ago. Know your limits and check for yourself. I can't stress that enough. In the day and age of social media, there's all kinds of fishing reports and ice reports. I do it myself. I try and make it as public and safe as possible, but every time I go out, no matter who told me what was out there, I check for myself. I can't stress that enough, that you can't just trust somebody blindly that this is good ice, or hey, you see somebody sitting out there in the middle of the lake, you can walk straight to them. Not always the case. Always check for yourself. Some of that equipment to check for yourself or help you stay safe out there. Spud bar. This is a spud bar. If you've never seen one or know what it is, it's probably 10, 15 pounds. It's not a light spud bar. One hit of this and a good strike with it, you're looking at over 2.5, 3 inches if it doesn't seep through, okay? So just spudding as you go, checking the ice, always a great thing. Ice picks, always have them on you and ready, especially if you're not sure of the variable conditions. Ice picks can make a world of difference in getting out if you do fall in. Thin ice, or just ice and safety in general. These are Catula micro spikes is what they call them. You can run across the lake with those things on and not lose traction. So it's really nice to have something that, you're sure-footed, especially on thin ice. You fall and break and, you can get a head concussion, you break bones. Those really help prevent slips and falls while we're out on the ice. Not only that, you slip and fall on thin ice, you might break through it. That sudden impact. Float suit, so these fishing bits from Striker, and there's a lot of different brands and stuff out there. They're purpose-built, knee pads, waterproofing, insulation. But just the pants themselves are enough to float you. They have garters at the bottom that kind of trap air, keep the water from rushing in right away. But they make jackets with flotation. There's built-in flotation enough that you have a reasonable chance of getting out if you have a float suit. I think most guys, their heads, even when they fall through, don't go under. So float suits are almost irreplaceable. A throw rope or throwable device is always good to have on you. We've witnessed several people going through the ice, and thankfully we haven't had to seek medical treatment afterwards or anything like that. But somebody did pass away at Clear Lake just a couple weeks ago. They got lost in the fog and disoriented and experienced angler, went into an aerator area and fell through and nobody found them. So just be careful, guys. I can't stress that enough. Those of you that have gone ice fishing, I guess, how do you decide where to go? Anybody? Where do you decide, when you decide you're gonna go ice fishing, what's the first thing you kind of base your decision on? Anybody?
Where you caught them before.
Where you caught them before, historical data, where you've had luck before. It's a great answer. What if you've never been to a lake? Where do you decide to go fish? I mean, this could be open water too, guys. I mean, it doesn't matter, open water, ice fishing.
Iowa DNR page.
DNR page, contact the DNR. DNR gives out a fishing report. You know where some of my best resources have come from the DNR? Their Master Angler program. Okay, you can go on there and search by body of water and see what people have been catching that are trophy-sized fish. You wouldn't believe it. Pits out in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, with one Casey store in a small town nearest, holding 14 to 16 inch crappie in it.
I'll sit at home.
If it wasn't for the Master Angler, I would have never even known about it or even tried to fish for it. You know, Master Angler program is great. What about within the lake? Is there any kind of spots that you would go look at? I have written down here, you know, there's always community spots, especially ice fishing. It's really clear to see where people have been and are currently. And the funny thing is like you said, people keep going back to these spots because they've caught their fish there before. And that's true. Those spots are community spots because they hold fish. But sometimes the best thing to do, not to fish somewhere else, because an isolated spot's always great if you get on fish, but you might not always want to put the time or effort into it. But just outside those community spots, when fish are pressured, they don't go clear across the lake to the dam or to another part of the lake. They don't move any further than they have to. So if you see a community spot and you're getting tired of catching 4-inch bluegill and 6-inch crappie, you should try and get away from those just a little bit, just around the outsides, because those fish, those bigger fish that don't like the pressure, they're going to move just off that. And that's a great place to start kind of figuring out where the community spots and pressure affect it, where you can go to kind of get back on fish if that doesn't work, right? You don't want to move clear across the lake. You don't have to go drill 100 holes to find a new fish. The fish are not far off. If you just get away from a little bit of the pressure and be patient, a lot of times you can catch some nice quality fish. I got on here weed lines, brush piles, DNR website. I mean, it has all kinds of maps and mark structure. For the most part, I found them to be pretty accurate. Some of them are outdated, some of the structure's diminished, but they can be pretty good. What about how deep? How deep do you think you want to fish in winter?
12, 15, 16,
12,
18.
15. Harley's an angler of all kinds of fish. 12, 15 feet, that's a nice area. Honestly, I've caught fish in 2 feet of water.
Right.
I've caught fish in 40 feet of water through the ice. Just depends on what time of year, where you want to go. Typically fish early and late in the season are up shallow. That's kind of where the food for them is.
Right.
And then as that food diminishes and the pressure kind of gets on those fish, they tend to move out to the deeper area and basins and kind of wander a lot more. Kind of getting into that, what's the most basic anybody's ever ice fished? Anybody that's been ice fishing for a long time, I said technology's come a long ways. What do you think the bare minimum to ice fish is? As far as equipment? Somebody that hasn't gone before that wants to try and doesn't want to put a lot of money into it.
A simple 5-gallon bucket, schoolie rod, some warm clothing.
Yeah, some warm clothing. When I take somebody ice fishing, they say, well, what do I have to have bibs? I tell them, well, you live in Iowa, you clear snow.
Right,
you know?
right.
Wear whatever you do to clear the driveway or sidewalk. Be perfectly fine, keep you warm enough.
Right.
Okay? I would say, somebody that doesn't have anything, if you're going out to a community area anyway, and there's reasonable, I guess, not super cold temperatures, right? You can go out to a community area even with a spud bar and knock open a hole or kick open a hole and you can fish that. You don't necessarily have to have a fancy fishing rod. I mean, there's custom rods up here from sponsors and stuff I use. I mean, there's thousands of dollars of equipment up here, but you don't need that. I mean, if you really want to get technical or really want to get an advance over that, I mean, you go get a hand auger. And in Iowa, the great thing is, yeah, we get ice, but we don't get 40 inches of ice.
Right.
We get 8, 12, maybe 15 if it's a good winter. You can still make enough holes with a hand auger in that kind of ice. You know, you're not going to be out there all day. So I mean, that's the way I started. Hand auger, buy a cheap, you know, Walmart rod,
Right.
some cheap, I mean, bare hooks even. You can
Right.
go out with some minnows, you know. But from there, I mean, things can get really technical. You know, just making a hole in the ice. You start with a spud bar or hand auger. You move up to a lot of guys run an electric drill. A lot of outdoorsmen. I mean, they got to fix stuff around their house. They have a reasonable electric drill. You can hook up a hand auger even to one of these. That's how I started. I hooked a hand auger up to mine, and it'll cut holes. You cut 100 holes in one battery. You know, and then they get a little bit more technical. You know, you always had your gas-powered 2 strokes, real heavy. Nobody wanted to log them around everywhere. These drills are super light. They've come up with plastic or synthetic flighting on them, so you're not hauling around a bunch of steel. And I mean, I have a 12 amp hour battery that makes that so heavy. But I mean, it's probably, if you put just a standard 5 amp hour on there, I bet we're only looking at maybe 6, 7, 8 pounds tops.
It's about 8.
And you know, you can cut holes all day with that thing. So there's been quite a bit of technological advances when that comes. You know, there's fancy electronics. You know, you don't necessarily need a Vexilar or a flasher or a live scope to go ice fishing. I mean, a lot of guys don't even do that. They go out on a bucket, they drop their bait to the bottom if they want. A lot of guys will start at the top and work their way down because fish feed up. They'll start at the top, and if they don't get a bite, they'll let it out at about a foot or two, and you know, and they can tell where the bottom is. They got the little lead clip-on weights. You can figure out how deep it is and line it up, and then you know, kind of give you an idea how deep the water is. What else I got here? So, even without a Vexilar or a fish finder, you know, sight fishing. I told you, you know, I've been fishing in 2 feet of water. You know, early and late season, shallow water fishing, you can sight fish. Sometimes when you get old and you can't lean over the hole all the time, I mean, people even drill 2 holes. They'll put one down to drop their lure in, and then they'll put one at an angle so they can sit upright on their bucket and look down and see their lure in 3, 4 feet of water. And those fish will swim right up to you. You can watch them swim right up and use your lure. Okoboji used to be really popular. They used to have gin clear water up there. I remember one of the first times I fished at Okoboji, we were sight fishing perch in 20 feet of water off the bottom. It was that clear. You could see your jig in 20 feet of water and watch fish swim up to it. That's kind of changed recently. You know, they had zebra mussels that helped make it that clear. After a while, zebra mussels kind of cloudy up the water with some of their byproduct, you know, from digestion and all that. But you know, you catch the lake at the right time. Early ice is still pretty clear before all that gets kind of trapped in the water. It's still a really great fishery up there. Always known for its clear water. Rods. We kind of touched on rods. Harley said, you know, a schoolie rod. Anybody know what a schoolie rod is? Schoolie rod. Okay. It's about a $10 rod and reel combo. It's literally a simple spool about 3.5, 4 inches around. Has a little plastic knob on it. There's no drag. There's like a little spring that can kind of help you, but it's basically direct inline reel. Basically it's an ice fishing reel. It's really cheap. A lot of the high-end tournament anglers actually prefer them because they're so simple. You know, if you're out there at -20, the last thing you want is for your reel to be iced up. Your spinning reel, your fancy, you know, expensive reel, they don't always operate the best when you sit them down in the snow. With a schoolie rod, there ain't much to go wrong there. I mean, it's either frozen or it's not. But it comes off pretty easily.
I like them.
You know,
That's what I started
there's
with.
about as many fishing rods for ice fishing as there is open water. I mean, different actions, different things. What I would say, if you're looking for advice on rod equipment in general, is to just make sure, just like open water, that you're finding an action and a length made for the type of fishing you want. We always kind of, down here in Iowa in the ice fishing community, we always kind of laugh at the Wisconsin ice fishermen because they're out there with their 5-foot rods. They call them long rodders in the community. They're out there with their 5-foot rods, even if they're fishing 5 feet of water or less. They're out there with their 5-foot rods, but they're standing up fishing the same we are. We're dealing down on the ice praying. You know, they're out there with their 5-foot rods, and when they catch a fish, they just lift the rod up. You know, they can get 10 feet in the air just doing this, right? Then they don't have to worry about reeling in or an ice fishing
somebody
rod,
was making
you know,
them.
ice fishing reel, icing up. So,
Yeah.
different things for different people. When it comes to bite indicators when ice fishing, you know,
Buckets,
there's
they're
kind of
perfect
two
right
schools
for
of
outside
thought.
the shower.
A lot of people are either visual
Yeah.
or touch. So, you know, if you're a visual person, if you're wearing gloves, a lot of people wear
Right,
gloves, you know, it's winter or whatever, you gotta have a real sensitive tip. If you play around with some of these rods up here, you'll notice a lot of them are pretty sensitive tips. That's so you can see just the slightest, you know, pickup of a bait on a crappie or whatnot. You can see that difference in your action. If you're jigging there, you can see that difference in your action. You know, just like open water fishing, carbon rods. Carbon really transfers the touch sensation through the rod to your hand. And so, you know, a lot of guys that take their gloves off and fish or whatnot, they keep their cord warm, their hands stay fairly warm. They will, they're more of a touch indicator. So they're sitting there actually with their fingers, and that's why you see some of the split grips. You know, you're out there, this is a perfect example of a carbon rod. You're out there, you have your finger out on the rod, and as soon as something changes in that cadence and that weight of the bait, or even the tick of a fish hitting it, you can feel it through the rod, and that's when you know, okay, I'm gonna set the hook and reel up. You know, usually the fish is there for them. So there's that whole line thinking. Line. If you're out pan fishing, how big of a test line do you use? Anybody? 2 pound, 4 pound, 2 pound, pretty light, right? What if you're out walleye fishing? You use the same line?
4.
2 pound, he says. He likes 2 pound, right? What kind of line do you use when you're walleye fishing?
Usually just, all I can find is tri-lane.
Tri-lane, so like a mono.
Yeah.
Got some stretch to it, right? Not all lines made the same, you know. You got mono, fluoro, braid. That's the main three. Mono, like I said, has some nice stretch in it. When it comes to ice fishing and freezing, you know, braid can be highly absorbent, that you don't have that as much in mono and fluorocarbon line. Braid absorbs water. If you're fishing outside in the elements, it's going to freeze up on you. It's going to absorb water into your reel. It's going to freeze up your reel. So maybe if you're an out of shelter fisherman, maybe you switch to mono or fluoro line on your reel. Fluoro is just a polymer that is a little stiffer. It can be a little clearer, but fluoro is also, just like carbon rods, is also a touch or transmission of that touch to your reel seat. So, you know, a lot of guys, I like 2 pound fluoro because it disappears. You know, a lot of guys, tournament anglers will speak to this. They'll say, use the line test that you can get, the smallest line diameter and line test that you can get away with, right? So, you know, if you go out there with 6 or 8 pound monofilament and you're out there catching 4 ounce bluegills, you're probably going to catch less fish because you're not going to feel the bite. You're not going to feel that lure change. Your lure action is going to be different. It's not going to be as reactive down under the water, okay? So there's a lot that goes into it, but you know, just learning kind of how to target the different species, and that's the other great thing about ice fishing community is most of us are pretty approachable. It's a social thing. Like everybody wants to watch people. I mean, that's one thing, you always watch people around you, and if they're catching, you're like, oh, maybe what are they doing different than I'm doing? you know, when you're in a boat, it's really hard to see that far away and see what people are doing. But when it comes to ice fishing, a lot of guys, you know, if they meet up at the ramp or when you're unpacking your stuff or repacking your stuff, you know, hey, how'd you do today? Oh, I caught a lot of fish. What were you using? I really struggled, man. I'm out there with my, you know, extra heavy walleye rod and using 8-pound, you know, braid, and I can't tell if I have a fish or not. Oh, I was out there using 2-pound fluorocarbon and a 2mm jig, which on my eyes aren't hardly good enough to tie a 2mm jig anymore. But you know, that's things that, you know, a lot of guys don't think about. But just the social interaction with ice fishing is a lot more prevalent in the ice fishing than the open water fishing. And guys are usually more than welcome to share their ideas and how they went about and share their successes. So it's always really good. How am I doing on time? I got plenty. Like 10 more minutes? Good, that's about what I got. But since most of you have already ice fished, then all that seems pretty boring probably. So that's okay. I wanted to give everybody, even if you hadn't ice fished, kind of a rundown of everything. But as you get involved, or as people get involved, or as we got involved, more accurately, part of what makes tournament fishing, whether it's our catfishing series or our ice fishing series, is it's not about necessarily winning. We don't structure our events about winning. We structure our events at a low entry fee, $100 per team, usually between 2 adults. You can manage $100 to have a good day out in the outdoors. You know, we make it, we structure our payouts of our cash prizes. We don't just pay out one prize to the top person. We pay out, at a 40 boat field, we pay out 5 spots, okay? Usually with that 5th spot, doubles their money. I mean, if you go out and you're having you're gonna be out fishing anyway. That's how me and Brad look at it. We're gonna go out fishing anyway. We might as well give ourselves a chance to maybe offset some, you'll never pay for it, but offset some of your costs by either winning or getting a door prize. And that's the other thing we do to make our events approachable, whether it's catfishing or ice fishing. We have great sponsors. This is our 2025 Ice Fishing Series sponsors. I think we're somewhere around 14 or 16 different sponsors of different levels. We have lithium batteries, Scout brackets, retractable tie downs. You know, the guy that owns Scout brackets, Jeff Niederman, I think is how you say it. Jeff Niederman, you know, he has a place up in Winnie, Minnesota. He was really aggravated with how securing and unsecuring his machines in the winter with the snow and the ice and everything, how frustrating that was. So he developed these brackets that are mounted either to your tow vehicle or to your machine that all have retractable ratchet straps built in. You know, you come up here and play around with this stuff. Lithium batteries is huge. I mean, huge technology change. This is a 30 amp hour battery. You can run that big fish finder all day long, full brightness, no worries. On a full charge, probably 12, 15, 16 hours easily, right? This is the lead acid that came with it. I mean, you can see how much slower I'm moving it. It's nowhere near the weight. This is a 12 amp hour battery. This is a 30 amp hour battery. It lasts me all day, okay? It's probably still half the weight. Still half the weight. Custom rods, you don't have to have custom rods. This is just what a lot of our rods are donated from different places. Most everybody this year, Catula is part of our sponsorship. They make the safety, foot adaptations for safety. We have a couple of bait shops and planer board manufacturers, lithium battery manufacturers, Striker, ice suits. But again, going back to the approachableness of our events, you know, me and my brother, when we decided to start doing these, me and my brother had recently lost our father, so we do a parent-child prize for anybody, for the highest placing parent-child that doesn't cash out, we pay their buy-in, okay? We give them their money back. That's completely through me and my brother, and as a kind of a memorial to our father. But, you know, a lot of our sponsors, they say, oh, well, I'm gonna give you a lithium battery for each event. Well, what are you gonna do with that? Well, just outside the cash, you know, if we got 40 teams, 6 places, a lithium battery, it's valued at, I wanna say 200, 200 bucks, 250, you know, for a 30 amp hour battery, it's a big deal. I mean, that's 2.5 times your entry fee right there. You gotta find the market for it. But, you know, people are getting their money back and then some. And I think just about, I know at our ice fish, or at our catfish events this year, every person that stayed for a door prize
Got a
got
whole
something.
house full of them.
Okay, so you're not just donating, and that's the thing that we wanted to make sure when we organize these things. that People didn't feel like they were just donating to these anglers that had all this time and knowledge and advantage. We didn't want them to feel like they're just donating and walking away with nothing. Yes, sir.
So you talked earlier about minnows, but I haven't really say anything about waxing. So what is the variety between
Yeah,
minnows and
the
waxing?
regular.
Minnows and waxies, depends on what you want to catch. Depends on what the fish wants. Live bait, you know, it's up and down. There's minnows, there's minnow heads. They call them crappie minnows, they call them walleye minnows. It's
Yeah.
just different
Yeah.
sizing.
Heck
Wax
yeah.
worms. You know, I'm gonna get into some little details about, now that I've kind of explained our tournaments, a little advantages that people don't think about. One of the things, you know, we went out with a fishing guy, Kevin Paul. Who's heard of Kevin Paul? Clear Lake Bait Tackle up in Mason City or Clear Lake. You know, that's how we decided to go ice fishing. We went to the trip with Kevin at Okoboji. One of the things Kevin has taught me over 3 or 4 trips with him over the years, one thing is waxies. You ever squeeze the heck out of a waxie till it's flat? Just squeeze everything out like a tube of toothpaste, and then put it on your hook. T-bone it on your hook, just hook it right in the middle. Now it comes like this. It's like a wacky worm, right? Like a little micro wacky worm, if you know what that is. Sometimes that's what they want, you know, they want that meat, they want that flavor. Waxies, they're pretty cold hardy, you know, compared to say spice or maggots. Little spice, they have a pointy end, and they have a flat end. There's 2 dots on the flat end, that's their face basically. They have a little scent gland in their face, or right behind those eyes. And if you puncture that when you hook them on, you hook 3 or 4 onto your little jig, that puts that scent out in the water.
Yeah, it's like an oil.
Waxies though, I never keep them warm enough. You get waxies too cold, they die. So I open my bait puck, a little plastic puck basically with a little screw on lid. Open my bait puck and mine are usually all dead, hard, shriveled up. Whereas waxies, even if they die, you can use waxies for a few days, even a week, you know. So waxies are always great. I always buy. I don't want you to open it, but there's a little container of waxies from last year in my bucket still. So I'm hard on them. Sometimes I forget to take them in, you know.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. But definitely, you know, minnow heads has definitely been a ticket. You know, crappie. I don't know if you guys know this,
Was it
but
too long
probably they
ago?
start
I
out,
just
they're
cleaned
small,
out
they
all
eat
my
vertebrates,
wax
you know,
from
they're
last
filter feed. You know, they're eating, you know, small invertebrates in the water. As they grow in size, they start
At
eating
least they
minnows.
don't ruin
As
the
they grow in
buck-
size
the bait
more, they
bucks.
start eating small
They won't stay.
bluegill and small crappie themselves. I mean, when you get a 16, 18 inch crappie,
Right.
you're no longer eating invertebrates, right? It might as well be bass down there. Buddy of ours, just got back from what they call the Kings of Panfish, up in Minnesota. It's an annual tournament. It's very competitive. Dave Jens, the founder and creator and inventor of these flip over ice shacks. He's a pretty heavy participant in that event as far as promotion and stuff. But those guys just got back. They told me they were using 1 16th-ounce lead jigs and 2 to 3 inch plastic baits to catch crappie through the ice.
Big baits. We were
Big
using
baits.
open water gear.
Open water, big baits.
I couldn't
okay?
believe it. These guys were aggressive.
They said that changed everything we ever knew about targeting big fish through the ice. You know, everybody wants to target these little small jigs. I have a little jig box over here I'll put out on the table if you want to look at them. But they're pretty tiny. I mean, I got some 2 millimeter jigs tied on a couple of my rods.
That's how I
That's
started,
fine.
dude. I didn't know
But
anything
it all
about
depends,
that.
you know, on what you're fishing. You know, again, tournament fishing. I have some tips in here about tournaments. Tournament format affects strategies that we see. Okay, if you only have to catch 5 nice fish, doesn't matter how many you catch as long as you catch 5 nice fish, right? But there's some tournaments that you have to catch 25 or weigh in 25 nice fish. Okay, a lot of times that becomes about speed and sorting. So you want to use the heaviest lure you can and still entice the quick bite catch rate. But that will vary. You know, sometimes you use a 2 millimeter jig on clear water up in Okoboji. The gills are notorious for being picky, especially the big ones. Whereas you go into some of these central Iowa lakes that have muddier water, stained water, and you can use a 4 millimeter, 5 millimeter jig because there's not enough food for all of them in the winter. There's not enough forage for all those small fish in the winter, so they'll pretty much hit anything you throw down there. Also unhooking, you know, anybody seen one of these before? Most ice fishermen have. You ever seen one of these? This is an item called a toothpick. It's got a little forked end. This one's been abused quite a bit. I need a different one. But this toothpick is basically a unhooking device that you can get into a small bluegill's mouth and push your jig back the way it hooked in and it pops right out. Most tournament anglers have something like that on them. Okay? It's all about time. It's all about churning the fish as fast as you can.
Yeah.
It's about quality. Okay?
And 20 degrees.
Even down to, you know, a lot of these spoons have a treble hook on. You know how hard it is to get 3 hook points out
Get
of
a
a
file.
bluegill's mouth?
Following
It is
in.
not fun. Most of the time they don't walk away with a mouth. Okay? A lot of guys will switch those to single hooks or a dangle chain with a single hook. It becomes that much easier to unhook them. Barbs even. I've seen ice fishermen pinch down the barbs on their hooks so they can get the hooks out quicker. Because all they're doing is they're getting them up as fast as they can to keep the pressure on them. They unhook them and drop right back down.
Right. Yeah.
Versus quality,
Yeah.
we'll touch on this. Quality,
Take that
5 fish
middle.
tournament formats, you only need 5
bottom.
bites. It's more about chasing than sitting on a
Right.
stool. More around the outside structure as they have the size to not fear as many predators, okay? I was out on Big Creek this year already, pretty dangerous, pretty
Yeah.
thin. It was pretty small area, we were actually able to fish comfortably. We found some brush piles, we moved right off of them. We moved right off of them, instead of catching 6-inch crappie, we're catching 14s. Move right off of them, instead of catching bluegills, we're catching white bass and stripers. We're catching, what did you say, 23, 24-inch walleye pulled out of that same brush pile just off of it, you know? Those bigger fish, they don't have to worry. I mean, the reason those little fish are by the brush pile is that's their shelter. The big fish are waiting for somebody to mess up and come out of that shelter, okay? That's why you wanna, if you're targeting big fish, you're looking for quality over quantity. You move off that structure just like you move off the pressure of that community spot, you can usually find nicer fish. What happens when you take a fish out of water? Huh?
Can't breathe.
Can't breathe. What else happens to a fish that lives in water all day when you put them out in the air?
Instantly refrigerated.
It shrinks, it freezes. Why does it shrink? Who said it shrinks? Why does it shrink? It's dying, it's dehydrated. You know what tournament anglers do? And there's kind of a funny rule. We always want the fish fresh. We don't want them frozen. It's not just because we want it easy to weigh the fish. But if you keep them fresh and you keep them on water, they don't dehydrate as much. Right? You get better weights. When you're running a tournament, you want as heavy weights as you can. Right? You want them fish to come in hydrated. Even with 25 fish, we'll make sure we put in a full 5-gallon bucket of water just so that they have enough water to stay hydrated. That's why when, not just from puking up, you know, catfish will puke up when they're caught and stressed, they'll regurgitate. But they'll also lose water weight. We've lost catfishing tournaments, only 5 catfish. We've lost catfishing tournaments by less than 2 ounces because we took our fish out of the live well and stood there with the basket waiting for our turn to weigh them. Instead of waiting until we got to our turn, taking them out of the live well and putting them right on the scale so they weren't dehydrated. Okay? So staying hydrated. keeping fish on water helps
Look
retain
that
water
up.
weight, not dehydrated. And scale mesher doesn't have to worry about slush or ice on your fish, which is always helpful. You know, we don't want people saying, oh, that person had a bunch of ice chunks in with their fish. We have washout stations. We drill a big area where you can get a bucket of water out right outside our weighing station so that you can de-slush your fish. You can make sure all the ice, and, you know, especially if it's super cold, just get those fish from being frozen so that you can pour all the water off of them and weigh an accurate weight and not have, you know, people complain about how accurate your weights are. What about if you got 25 fish and everybody's catching the same fish? How do you get an advantage?
Kickers.
How do you know?
Catch fish and fish.
Out of 50 fish, how do you know which 25 you want to weigh in?
You weigh them.
You
Weigh
weigh
them.
them, right? My wife, I stole so many digital scales from my wife because I forget when
I
my
have
scales
better
are.
digital scales than my wife.
Just the digital kitchen scale. You wouldn't think of it, but most tournament anglers take a digital kitchen scale with them.
Fucking right.
You can't always just eyeball the difference in grams, right? You're talking 25 fish, 1 gram is 0.002 pounds. You think you can eyeball 0.002 pounds?
I've lost my point.
2
days
thousandths of a
back.
pound?
A
No,
few years
grams.
ago,
I always,
so.
Greg kind of left it to me, but I always weighed in grams.
0.03. Oh, wow.
You get down, 235 grams, 238 grams, over 25 fish, 3 grams
Place.
per fish. You know, it starts to stack up. Instead of 2,000s, you're talking about 700s. You know, and that's how a lot of these tournaments come down to just the hundreds. 25 fish crappie limits coming in with ties for 3rd place. We won 3rd place in tournaments because we weighed in first. A lot of times weighing in first is your tiebreaker. There's a couple things I've seen some of my colleagues do wrong or mess up in tournament angling. I told Richard, this Richard Grimes over here, he fished the Kings of Panfish. Richard, didn't you?
Yeah, you tried.
What did they joke about buying you up there? Did you see that post?
Oh, yeah. Fish counters.
Fish counters, gloves with 1 through 10 written on the fingers, right? You bring an extra fish to weigh in,
You're disqualified.
you're disqualified, right? So count your fish, count them twice.
Yeah. 3 times, probably.
Another one of our friends that was highly competitive when we were fishing tournaments, they were always the team to beat. And, I mean, there might be 80 teams on 12 Mile Lake, I think, that day. And we never saw them from the start to the finish. Once it started, everybody would walk pretty far. They just kept going. They probably walked from the south end of 12 Mile to the north end of 12 Mile to fish. It took them probably 45 minutes at least to walk up there. They came in late to weigh in by 8 minutes. Got an 8-pound deduction on a 25 fish limit. That was enough to knock them clear out of running. I mean, 20, 30 spots out of 80 anglers they dropped. So the next event we saw them at, we bought them a clock and put it on a necklace and gave it to them. So and that was Chad Angel. A lot of people remember that happening. But there's just, I mean, even little things, you know. If you pay attention, and this has helped me even open water, I pay attention to this. But one of the things, again, Kevin Paul showed us, I want to say even on our first trip, what happens, let's say you're fishing a jig, okay? And you probably don't think about this a lot. But what happens when you miss a bite and a fish bites your jig and you miss it? You feel that tug, right? But what usually happens to your jig?
Tear your jig.
Huh?
Tear the jig.
Tears the jig, tears the bait, tears the plastic, yeah. One thing, these jigs, I don't know, you know, these jigs are designed to mimic a horizontal presentation, right? So you have an eyelet at the top of your jig, even if it's open water, you have an eyelet at the top of your jig. I usually tie an improved clinch knot. Anybody know what an improved clinch knot is? Okay, I usually tie an improved clinch knot. It's pretty durable knot, it's pretty tight, and tighten it down really hard, okay? That's important to me because when I tighten down on that eyelet of that jig, I want that line coming back over the hook, okay? I'll pull that line back over the hook so that when I let go of it, that jig is sitting horizontal. When a fish bites that and you miss a bite, it pulls that knot around the eyelid of the jig so it's not horizontal anymore. Okay, so now your bait's down there like this, when it could be sitting down here like this and kicking its tail. You know, just those little nuances makes a world of difference between catching or not. You know, I've sat in a boat, over a brush pile. You're just vertical jigging, walleye, you're vertical jigging a lot. Well, just because you're vertical jigging doesn't mean you don't want that bait to be horizontal. So even open water fishing, I'll check my knot, make sure it's, you know, pulled back over the hook, to make sure that presentation is horizontal. So, I guess at this point I'd open it up to any questions anybody has about anything that's up here, anything you haven't seen before. I can go into any more detail. You're more than welcome to ask any questions if you got them.
Tell us a little bit about the tournament at State Park, Badger Creek.
Badger Creek, that's coming up Sunday. We've been out there checking ice. I fished Badger Creek more often than I probably would this year, because I've been out there checking ice pretty regularly. And if I'm gonna take the hour drive from Perry, where I live, down to Badger Creek, maybe not an hour, a half hour, I'm gonna see if I can fish at least while I'm there, right? So we have an event this Sunday at 12 Mile. We've been watching the ice. It fully capped today, which is good. The wind isn't going to be a factor for the rest of the week in building that ice and evening out the ice thickness, because it was varying 0 to 5 inches just Sunday when I was there, you know. But that event is going to be 5 crappie, 5 sunfish is the way we classify it. So you don't have to have a bluegill per se, because there are red ears and other fish in there. Our ice fishing events, they all run, I believe it's 8 to 3, 8 to 2, 8 to 2. 8 o'clock, because the sun doesn't come up really that early. We want everybody to be safe. A lot of guys are unpacking their gear in the dark anyway. But we do an 8 o'clock launch, 2 o'clock weigh-in, $100 entry per team, lots of door prizes. The ice won't be thick enough to have machines, so it'll be a walking only event, which isn't bad because the boat ramps are in the middle of that lake. So if you want to go to the north end or the south end, you have about the same amount of walking. That's not always available at other lakes, so that's nice.
Are you pre-drilling holes?
No, sir. If you come to our event, once you enter the ice with your equipment, you're kind of on your own. Okay. So you know, if you can use community holes or holes that are already drilled. That you know, there's a couple rules involved in that, which are all posted on our group. But you know, you can't be within a certain distance of another team, because we don't want you sharing fish. We want everybody to feel like you know, people aren't encroaching on their space to a certain degree, right? So you know, there will be holes drilled. I mean, that was the old. It used to be. I loved it before these live scopes, because the way people would go out and pre-fish is they'd go out to an area they thought might hold fish, and they'd drill it out in a grid pattern. Okay. The whole point or sandbar would be drilled out every 10 feet in any direction. I mean, you go, as long as it wasn't super low overnights, you just go kick open holes the next morning. You know, you didn't have to drill all the holes. But no, once you enter the, everybody's kind of on their own. I used to have a bunch of equipment I'd loan out to different participants that didn't have them, people that were taking their kids out. I'd offer up, you know, my extra Vexilars and fish finders and stuff. And those guys were always super appreciative. I always got my stuff back. But yeah, it is kind of one of those things. And again, you don't have to have thousands of dollars of fishing equipment to come out and enjoy our events. That's the way kind of we have them. You know, you can get out there with a hand auger. You can get out there with a cheap Walmart fishing rod and some cheap jigs. But yeah, once you enter the ice, you know.
So anywhere on Badger Creek is legal?
Correct, as long as you don't.
Leave like.
Correct. The way we put it in the boating is anywhere navigable by your boat. So you can't go on land to better your catch. Same thing, ice fishing. You can't leave the lake. You can't, if you can't get there by walking on the ice, then it's out of bounds, okay? You can't go up over the dam and fish below the dam.
So you can stop fishing, go up and use the bathroom?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. There is also a rule about staying within a certain distance of your teammate. So unfortunately, your teammate has to go to the bathroom with you, or he has to stop fishing, right? And a lot of it's self-policed. I mean, this isn't something that we're, oh, so-and-so is sitting too close to me. We're not gonna just be out there chasing down every rule, you know. Again, that's why we keep it a low entry fee, lots of things to win.
Biggest fish, smallest fish, any other variety of fish?
It's all by weight, so five crappie, 5 panfish or sunfish, right? So if you catch a bass, it's not a crappie, it's not a sunfish.
Let it
So-
go, 'cause it's not a part of it.
You can keep it, it's part of your legal catch, but you can't weigh it in. So, we do have a little different event at 3 Mile where it's about yellow bass, and that's kind of a lot of people love catching yellow bass. They're numerous, they're aggressive through the ice. If you don't know what a yellow bass is, it's just like a white bass, but a master angler's 10 inches. Okay, most of them are in that 8 to 10, sometimes a lot smaller range. But we do have a yellow bass event at 3 Mile. But everything else will be 5 crappie, 5 sunfish at Big Creek, 12 Mile, and Badger Creek. That was another thing I had written down, was just to kind of go through kind of what we got going on. So Sunday, January 12th, Badger Creek Lake, final decision on ice safety will be made Friday. So far we got 13 out of 40 teams, so there's plenty of space. Without really good ice, it's hard to get people to commit. But I imagine we'll have at least that many teams show up and pay day of, okay? So we're probably looking at a 20 to 25 team field at that.
If I could ask a question about that. So you got 23, 27 spots still open, and them guys don't pay until the day of, but if I pay tomorrow, then I'm bumping one of them guys out then?
You're guaranteed to be in if you're bid.
Right.
Yeah. So if
Snooze, you
we
lose.
do payment through Venmo, PayPal, or
Right.
special arrangement in person.
Right.
Okay, because not everybody uses those, obviously, right? But right now, if you don't have Venmo or PayPal, you could still show up day of, pay cash and get it.
Right.
Right?
So the limit on bluegill and crappie is quite larger, so you
Mhm.
can just keep everything and then take your biggest ones at the end.
That is your legal right to, yep. DNR,
Just keep them hydrated in a bucket or
correct, yeah. Well, and it's to your benefit, like we talked about, you know, you don't want them to dehydrate, we wanna have them fresh, not frozen. Even if they're frozen, you can tell a fish that was caught today versus a fish that was caught yesterday even, okay? It's pretty apparent, we've seen a lot of fish, we've not wanted to clean fish till the next day.
The digital scale you talked about, is that just a common item at the?
$10 at Walmart, yeah, just kitchen scale, yeah.
Works the best.
So kind of going into that a little bit, the DNR biologists have to approve all our tournament permits. Most of the DNR biologists, as long as they're staying within the state regulations, they don't mind. Jeff Kaposka, I'm not sure if he's the head biologist anymore, I think he might have changed roles. But Jeff Kaposka used to manage all the fishing biologists, and I've gotten to talk to him quite a bit. He actually says there's little to no impact of fishing tournaments on the quality or health or well-being of fish in a lake. I mean, you might think, a perfect example, you know, yellow bass, okay, Clear Lake, at some point, I believe they had over 5 million estimated yellow bass in that lake. Now they're somewhere around 1 million, okay? That wasn't just from fishing tournaments, okay? If you know anything about fish and biology, most of these fish aren't gonna live forever, especially the smaller fish, panfish, whatever. You know, every year, that year class gets smaller and smaller through predation, natural causes, just old age, right? The yellow bass population in Clear Lake, through aggressive predator management, water quality management, and just through old age, has reduced to 1 million. Now, instead of catching nothing but yellow bass, or 6-inch yellow bass, when you do find one, it's 10 inches plus, okay? You find crappie more often now that the yellow bass population has reduced, because there's not as much competition for the crappie. There's a huge hatch of perch up there. I mean, people get tired of catching these little fingerling perch, because there was this huge hatch, because now all the yellow bass weren't eating all the forage for the perch. They had a better spawn that year, okay? So, I bring that up because the reason that we're limited to 5 and 5 isn't because they're worried about us decimating a lake fishing population. They're not worried
So
about
it's
that.
per team, 5 and 5.
Yes, 5 and 5 per team.
Not per person.
You could weigh in 25 per team, and the DNR would say that doesn't have any effect on the lake. You know, you could have Clear Lake, 300 teams of 2 catching as many as they can in 5 hours or whatever. You can take, I mean, even at that rate, it's only a few thousand compared to 5 million, right?
What's your experience with like, so that lake, you catch panfish on this color during the summer, is it the same in the winter? Catch them on the same?
Can be. My favorite color for crappie is pink. White's always popular, you know? But again, why we're limited to 5 and 5 isn't because they think it's a detriment to the fish population. It's more because they're worried about people complaining to the DNR about people keeping buckets of fish. Literally, every other DNR biologist, other than the one for Big Creek here in Polk County, was fine with a 25 fish panfish mixed bag limit at all our tournaments. He specifically said, I don't want to hear the public complain about buckets of fish. We have a specific rule in our rules that you can catch and keep your limit, but try and keep them out of public view at weigh-in. We don't want buckets of fish in our publicity and public image. We don't want buckets of fish being caught, even though the DNR biologist says that it has no effect. They don't want public opinion to be that negative, you know, so there's some stuff that plays into that. Now, does that make our jobs easier or harder? Sometimes. You know, is it easier to have an impressive weigh-in bag or higher weights with a higher limit of fish? Yeah. Is it hard to discern who wins when you're only weighing in 10 fish? Yeah. You know, ties are pretty often. I mean, ties happen. We have it. Tiebreaker is big fish versus, you know, if there's a tie break for bag of fish, we use the big fish as a tiebreaker. If you don't weigh in a big fish, you give up that option, right? If we have a big fish tie, we use the bag weight to break that tie, vice versa. Okay, I've never seen a bag fish tie not broken by a big fish tiebreaker or vice versa. It's never been that identical. But again, big fish has its own separate price. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I want to say with a 40 boat field, it's like $300.
It has to be in these categories of fish though, can't it?
Yes, it can be either or. It can be a crappie or a bluegill. You pick out your big fish at weigh-in. Brad usually runs the scales and he'll ask you to identify that fish and choose that fish yourself. He won't choose it for you. Once you leave the weigh-in, he's not going to re-weigh your fish. He asks you, he does it right in front of you. He asks you if you're good with the weight. Is that accurate to what you thought you had? Yep. And the guy said, we've had a couple guys say, no, would you re-weigh my fish? Yep, no problem. Pour him out of the basket, make sure the scale's zeroed out, put him back in the basket,
It would.
rescale it.
Yeah.
The only problem with that, again, they're out of the water,
Right.
they're dehydrating.
Take that
The odds of
first
you weighing
weight
the
and
same
move on.
weight at the same time is a little slim, right? But usually it's lower because the fish dehydrate. But
Right.
there's a lot of nuances. We have our rules posted. I didn't bring a copy of them. You know, everything's in there for a reason. There's not like a lot of superficial rules in there just to, you know, for reading content. But yeah, I mean, again, we're not out there trying to enforce every little thing. We do have a rule in there. If you're gonna make a formal complaint, it has to be made within 30 minutes of the completion of weigh-in person and in writing. You know, so you have to bring it up. You can't leave the event and then complain about it. We're not gonna be able to do anything at that point, right? So there's all those types of things, of problems that we've experienced that we try and weed out ahead of time, make the events enjoyable. The great thing is, you know, if you're waiting for 40 teams to weigh in, usually you're standing around just chit-chatting with a bunch of guys that just came off the lake that you did. You know, Chad Angel, you know, I always like to go talk to him, and while I'm talking to him, I'm looking at what he had time on. Yeah, I bet that worked today. you know? So that was always good. Anybody else have any questions, anything I can elaborate on, any equipment? Again, I guess if nobody has any questions, you know,
So as far as the rules in Iowa, it's two lines per person, and you can,
3 lines, if you have a third line license, you can use a third line, okay?
a third line license.
Yeah, so Iowa DNR, for an extra fee, you can have a third line permit on top of your, like a trout fee, right, like a trout
Do you know
stamp.
how much that is?
$12.
Yeah,
I wanna say
$12.
$12. I have it on auto renew because, a lot of times catfishing, it'll be a 6-rod max, but you can have 6 rods with only 2 anglers in the boat at that time then, if you both have a third line license. We say all fish must be caught by rod and reel in our rules. So yeah, you can have 3 lines. How many rods and reels can you manage if the bite's hot? Usually I only manage 1.
Right.
There's devices called tip ups or tip downs or jaw jackers that you can put your rod and reel into. That's still legal. Tip ups, there's not a rod, there's not a reel. I mean, there's not a real reel.
For bigger fish.
Right. So technically tip ups aren't allowed at our events, but you know, there's other ways around that with tip downs, jaw jackers, dead sticks.
But as far as live aging and anything goes.
Yep, if it's legal, it goes.
And it's
Yep.
gotta stay within X amount of feet of you at all times.
Just because you have a line set over here, you're actively fishing that line technically. That doesn't prevent another team from coming in and fishing right next to that line. You get a fish on that line and there's a team fishing next to it, you can't go catch that fish. Cause you have to maintain a certain distance from all other teams.
Well, you wouldn't have it that far.
Well, right.
You wouldn't have it more than you're.
Right, and if you're in a community spot, you're probably not setting out a bunch of lines, right? But there is that whole strategy of
Yeah, it
hole
doesn't
blocking,
sound like it'd be a
right?
very
If
good
you're not
idea.
actively fishing that hole, like you said, you have to drill your own holes? No. Somebody drills out an area
Yeah.
and they're 15 feet away, have at
Right,
So you can use their hole.
it. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. You can wait for somebody to drill out an area and just wait for them to move 20 feet off and oh, there's a hole.
Is that our competitor, is that what we are in this tournament series?
What?
20 feet?
I don't remember, it's in the rules.
Do you
Richard,
feel
I'm
for
sorry.
these panfish tournaments that it's okay to be drilling the big holes, or do you just prefer
I don't.
to drill the small hole?
I drill as small hole as possible.
It's 6 inches big enough.
Well, yeah,
Right.
it's big enough, but I just thought maybe it's better for your jigging to have that line going out differently.
I don't
You're
know
gonna
that
drill
makes.
quicker and more holes too if you're drilling.
Right.
I mean, that's key to it, being able to,
So-
get down through that ice. A bigger auger, it's gonna take a while.
Well, the only thing I'm looking at is the jigging.
You might lose less fish too. I mean, you got a bigger hole, there's less likelihood of you rubbing the bottom of the ice. It's all preference, it's all strategy.
And there
You
is
wanna haul around,
lures that you can drop that will
That's what
actually take
you wanna
off.
haul around a 20-pound, 10-inch auger, have
It'll
at
still
it.
do it
You're not
with the
gonna drill
6.
that holes all day.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, if anybody has any more questions, feel free to approach me, but if there's anything you have questions about up here, just let me know, but I think we'll wrap it up.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you,
Thanks,
Alan.
Jeff.